Hello there. Welcome to the Mixtape Podcast, the podcast dedicated to deconstructing film from a screenplay writer's perspective. I'm your host. My name is Marcelo Nestroza, joined as always by my psychological con my psychological consciousness, Dean Stark. And on today's program, we will be discussing the 2001 film Memento. As always, as we often do here on the show, Dean will try to take us through this film without losing her fucking mind. So, with that being said, Dean, shall we begin?
I have never seen Memento before this, and the reason I hadn't seen it is because I avoided it at all costs. Because people were like, it's really confusing to follow, it's all done out of order, it's backwards. And I'm like, you know what? I don't actually have the brain to do that right now. And so I just never watched it. So let's get into it. Let's try and follow my notes and see how we go. So, Memento, written and directed by Christopher Nolan. Leonard Shelby, an insurance investigator, suffers from a rare form of memory loss. He was. Let me try that. Let's fucking take two. Let's fucking take two on this. I can't read my writing. I was so stressed about watching this movie, I fucking scribbled. All right, take two. All right. Leonard Shelby, an insurance investigator, suffers from a rare form of memory loss. I can't. What the fuck does that say? Oh, that's right. Okay, take three. This is take three. You couldn't read my writing. I wish I could take a picture and show. Okay, this is fucking take three. Oh my god. Okay, here we go. Leonard Shelby, an insurance investigator, suffers from a rare form of memory loss. He uses notes and tattoos to hunt for the man he thinks killed his wife. Yay! We got there. Oh my fucking god. Okay, so this has an Australian actor called Guy Pearce. I think this was like his breakout role, and then everybody kind of wanted him. So the opening scene, I really like the opening scene because it's just a shot of a Polaroid. And it's got the opening credits, but it's just the Polaroid, and you're kind of looking at it, and then it's kind of starting to fade. Like, for anybody that's old that's ever used a Polaroid camera, when you take a photo, and you pull it out of the Polaroid camera, it's white, and then the image starts to appear. So what Christopher Nolan has done is he's done it backwards. So he's making the Polaroid actually go back to disappearing when it's white, when it just comes out of the Polaroid, which I think is really cool. And it's really sets the tone for the movie, because he's basically saying this movie is done out of order and backwards. But I really, 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 really love that. Do you love that?
Despite what I have said to you on multiple occasions, I do like stories that challenge the viewer to use their brain. But with that being said, there's one thing of challenging the viewer to use their brain and frustrating the viewer because they just can't keep the story straight in their head. The wonderful thing about the way that Christopher Nolan constructs his films is he presents you with, just let's say for the sake of this podcast, he presents you with a box and he goes, I want you to open this box, right? So you go through the motions, and once you open the box, you discover that there's a smaller box. And inside of that, there's a smaller box. And inside of that, there's a smaller box. So the way that Christopher Nolan structures his films, to make a long story short, is very, very intriguing, but they can be extremely frustrating if you're not used to his acumen.
Yes, exactly. To be honest, I think if this movie was edited straight, it wouldn't be great. I think the reason why it's good is the way it was presented. Because if it was, I know there's a cut where you can watch everything in a linear fashion, and that's fine. I don't care to watch that because I don't know, it would just be like a boring movie to me. The fact that it was edited the way that it was makes it so good. So anyway, after the Polaroid, you see there's a scene where Guy Pearce's character is shooting someone in the head. You don't know who it is yet, but as soon as he shoots him in the head, it rewinds. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And again, it's kind of setting up the whole, this movie is rewound. So anyway, so that's the opening scene, and you're confused as shit. And then the first scene is Guy Pearce's character is, and remember, everything is out of order. So there's no introductions. You don't know who anyone is. It's like, yeah, it's just weird. Guy Pearce is at a hotel and he's talking to the hotel manager. And he turns around, he sees the guy he just killed. And as an audience member, if you don't know this movie is out of order, you're going to be confused. I think that's what confuses people. When this movie first came out, when people saw it in the cinema, I think that's why people thought it was confusing. But watching it, knowing that it is out of order, it's less confusing because you know that it's out of sync. I don't know. Do you feel that, like, okay, when you first watched this movie, because you've seen it more than me, did you know that it was edited out of order?
When I first watched this movie, I wasn't on the path of becoming a screenplay writer yet, but in subsequent rewatches, it does help knowing that the film is out of order, and as an audience member, you are given clues, but clues that don't make sense. But a scene or two later, they will make complete sense. The thing that I love about the way that this film is structured, I often talk about dropping hats on the ground. So Guy Pearce's character Leonard would do something, right? He would interact with a character, right? And about two scenes later, you would see how Leonard initially met that character. So after you do that, you could, as an audience member, you have to put two and two together. But I think that doesn't work for the general audience member who is not paying attention while watching this film. I adore this film, but if you're not paying attention, you're going to be more frustrated and more lost than anything.
Yeah, you definitely have to pay attention. I mean, look, when I watched the movie and I did write notes, I thought, I don't know how I'm going to deconstruct this as a screenwriter because it's out of order, it's out of sync. You don't, I mean, you don't really get a character arc, you don't really get a story arc. Like you got somehow it works without working. Do you
Right?
know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and yeah, I absolutely know what you mean. But the only reason it works is because it's broken and it's rewound. If this
Yeah.
story was told linearly, like 99% of the stories that we've talked about, or 99% of the movies that we've talked about on this podcast, this film would not work. And throughout the course of the movie, you really get a sense of what it feels like to be in Leonard's uh, you as an audience member, you really get a sense of what it must feel like to be Leonard. So while you were giving the introduction, that sort of just popped into my head. That may be the reason why Christopher Nolan shot this film in this particular way, and why his brother wrote the short story in this particular way, was to put the audience in the mind of their principal character, that being Vincent, to make the movie the disease that Vincent is suffering from.
I think it absolutely worked because I really connected with Leonard. I felt the more the movie goes along, the more you put the pieces together, the more you feel fucking so bad for him. You feel so fucking bad for him because it's easy to take advantage of someone that has a memory of, like, I think it's like 10 or 15 minutes, and then he just doesn't remember. It's so easy, and people do. Anyway, let's continue because that's kind of later on. So his Guy Pearce's character is in the hotel. He sees the guy that he just killed, and the guy that he just killed, they know each other. Like, he knows him, but Guy Pearce doesn't know him because he's got memory loss. So they get into a car and they drive to like an old abandoned place, and he finds a Polaroid of the guy that he's with, and he turns it over and it says, "Teddy, don't believe his lies, he's the one, kill him." And throughout this movie, to help him remember, he takes Polaroids of everything and every person and writes down who they are and a little bit of information about them on the back, which I thought is actually a really, really ingenious thing to do for Christopher Nolan to put into the movie to sort of help him remember and to push the story along. Because without those Polaroids, I mean, you wouldn't have a story. There would be no story because Guy Pearce wouldn't remember anything. You wouldn't know anything. He'd just keep forgetting every 15 minutes, and you'd be going around in circles. Anyway, so this guy's name is Teddy. So Teddy comes in, and then we see the opening scene where he draws a gun on Teddy. And Teddy turns around to him before he shoots him, and he says, "You don't know who you are." And then Guy Pearce, clocks him in the head, and that's the opening scene. And so it's like, okay, this movie is running backwards. Once you get a sense of how the editing is, I think it's pretty easy to follow along.
I have an obsession with screenplay writers, dropping hats on the ground to lead the audience. But the ingenious thing about this film is that the hats that Christopher Nolan is laying on the ground, and by extension, his brother laid on the ground in the original story, are going backwards. So,
Mm.
I just wanted to add that little, sprinkle in there.
So the next scene is Guy Pearce, and he's writing on the back of the Polaroid about Teddy. Like what we just saw, it says, "Don't believe his lies." We actually see him writing it. And it's like, oh, okay. And then he's talking, and then he goes to the hotel manager and he's saying, "Hey, you know me?" And the hotel manager's like, "Yeah, I know you." He goes, "Yeah, I've got," and he explains he's got short-term memory loss and he's sorry he doesn't remember him. And he's basically like, "Have I told you this before?" And the hotel manager's like, "Yeah, you've told me this." So anyway, Teddy walks into the hotel, which was the start of the scene before, and then they get in the car.
It's great. It's great.
And you're like, oh my God. Yeah, no, it's great. Once you figure out how, like, what's going on and how it's edited, it's like, oh my God, it is a mind fuck. I mean, it is. So anyway, after that, we're at his hotel room and he has a map on the wall and all the Polaroids up of certain places and people, and he's looking for something. So we don't know what the story is yet. He's looking for something, and then he opens his shirt in front of the mirror and there's tattoos all over his body, and it's reminding him of stuff. So like the Polaroids, he's just tattooed very, very important information like license plate numbers, names, all this stuff on his body, which is kind of cool. Just reminds him what he needs to do. So he finds out Teddy is not his real name, and then he writes on the back of the Polaroid, which was the scene we saw before, but this is the scene leading up to him writing on the back of the Polaroid that this guy's full of shit. And on his chest, across his chest, he has "John G. raped and murdered my wife." And so you're like, okay, you kind of get a gist of where the story. Okay, so maybe he's looking for the person that raped and killed his. You kind of don't know 100% yet, but you know where it's going.
For me as an audience member, when I watched this film the third time, it clicked in, and um, I had no, I really had a firm understanding of the story at that point. I really understood that this guy is looking for the man. This guy is looking for the man or the individuals who killed his wife. But the great thing, the crux that makes this movie work is the fact that he can't remember anything for more than 10 seconds. So that's what makes this movie work. Also, I really, really want to ask you something before I forget it. You know that I have, a very interesting opinion about voiceover and how it's used. I, yeah,
Uh-huh.
I really like the voiceover in this film because I thought it was necessary to get into Vincent's mind and to have him tell the story about how he learned about memory loss and about his previous life as an insurance adjuster. So, what did you think about the way that? Did you like the way that Christopher Nolan handled voiceover in this film?
Are you talking about the black and white bits, which I'll get to, or are you talking about the bits just where he's randomly got a thought and it's
Either of
voiceover?
them.
Okay, So the random bits where it's just Guy Pearce doing voiceover, like sometimes he'll be like, shit, where's my gun? Or like, where did I leave this? Here's a little bit of trivia before I get to the trivia. That was Guy Pearce making it up. Like that wasn't dialogue. That was Guy Pearce just ad-libbing what the voiceover of what he thought his character would say in the moment, and then Christopher Nolan just edited it in, which I thought was pretty cool. So that wasn't scripted. Yes, so there's black and white bits that is intercut through the whole movie. I did not write any of it down because it was so convoluted as it fucking was. My notes would have been up the fucking yin yang, as you would say. So I didn't write it down, but intercut through the movie, there's black and white bits, and it tells the backstory of Leonard. He was an insurance broker, and he never used to suffer from memory loss until he was knocked out and it got brain damage. And that's when his memory loss started, which is when there's people broke into his house and they were trying to rape and murder his wife. He tried to get away, blah blah, and then they sort of clocked him in the head, and ever since then he's had memory loss. And it kind of goes through. I did actually really like the story in the black and white bit about his, I don't know, was it his client? Was the woman his client or the man? And that man was suffering from the memory loss that he's suffering from. And it's like this whole story. I mean, through the whole movie, I was thinking this makes no sense, but then in the end, it kind of does make sense. So what are your thoughts on the black and white bits? I enjoyed the black and white bits, even though they were confusing, but at the end, it does actually make sense.
I actually thought that the black and white bits were everything that happened before the movie started. So I assumed that the individual that he was talking to on the phone, he was relaying everything that we were seeing as an audience in color. And his client, when he was an insurance adjuster, was the man. And his experience with that couple made him understand after he got injured that in order for him to survive in this world, he had to become reliant on routine. He had to become reliant on routine. That's the only way that he was going to function and get anything done with this disease.
Yeah. But yeah, the black and white stuff will come back a bit, like right at the end, it comes back, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. So anyway, the next scene is he goes to a restaurant to find someone called Natalie. He has a Polaroid of her. It says Natalie. And he sits down at a diner or the restaurant, and she's got bruises. She's got glasses on. She's got bruises. She's got a cut lip. So you kind of know she's been kind of beaten up. And she's giving him information about who killed his wife. And then she tells him about the abandoned place that he was at in the beginning when he shot Teddy. So it's like, oh, that's how he knows to take Teddy there, because she told him. So that's Natalie. She's going to come in and out of the script annoyingly. So even though I love Carrie-Anne Moss, that's Carrie-Anne Moss, by the way. So anyway, the next scene is he's having lunch with Teddy. He goes back to the hotel. He says that he lost his key. The hotel manager checks. See, this is what I found really weird. The hotel manager checks his room, goes in, opens his room, and his shit is in there, right? So Leonard's shit, Guy Pearce's stuff, is in there. And then he says he moved him last week to another room. And Leonard's like, he goes in and he's like, but this is my stuff. And he's like, yeah, I moved you next week and last week.
But do you know why he did that?
I don't know.
Because when before last week, Leonard already told the manager of the hotel his condition, right? So the manager of the hotel was told by the owner of the hotel to double book him because he knew that Leonard wouldn't remember.
But why is Leonard's stuff in the old room? And why has it been in the old room for a week? Because, like, anybody that stays in hotels, like, they know that as soon as you check out, the maid comes in, cleans for the next person to check in. So why is his stuff still in his old room from a week ago? That makes no sense from a hotel standpoint.
Yes, I understand
what I mean.
But number one, this place is seedy. It doesn't have any maids. And number two, the manager of this hotel has moved Leonard more than 4 times. because he does make, yeah, he
Yeah, no, that's
does
true.
mention that Leonard has like 4 rooms booked. Leonard has 4 rooms
Yeah.
booked within the hotel.
Yeah, right. Okay. That didn't make sense, but yeah, it makes sense now. So anyway, the next scene, he wakes up next to Natalie, who is the one that he just met in the diner, wakes up in bed next to her, and he's kind of confused as to why he's there. And then he gets up and he walks around her house a bit, and he finds a photo of Natalie and her husband. And we don't know that's her husband. Like, they're in a cuddly pose. You assume that it's her boyfriend, husband, or whatever. So that's that scene. The next scene is he shows up at Natalie's house and he doesn't know who she is. And he shows her a Polaroid of someone named Dodd. It's a Polaroid of a guy that's like beaten up. He's got duct tape over his mouth. He's got blood on him, and it's just called Dodd. And he puts the Polaroid up to her and he's like, "Who the fuck is this?" And she says, "You helped me because Dodd beat her up." And she's telling him he told her he would help her, and obviously now he doesn't. She's like, "You don't remember?" And he's like, "No, I don't remember." And then so this scene precedes the scene where he woke up next to her in bed. So this is her coming to her house, this is him coming to her house, and then they wake up the next morning. So that's that scene.
I really, again, I'm going to say constantly, on this podcast, not that I want you to explode or anything, but you really have to pay attention in this movie. And this movie is ingenely this movie is ingeniously crafted, but I feel that this movie is made for people like us, because I can just see a normal person trying to figure this movie out and walking the fuck out of the movie theater.
Yeah. Okay, so the next scene is he wakes up in a hotel room. Clearly, he has no idea where he is, and he looks in the closet. He's got somebody tied up in the closet who is Dodd, who is the guy from the Polaroid that he went to fucking Natalie's house. There's a knock at the front door. It's Teddy. Asks him. Teddy asks him, like, who is that guy? Oh no, is it him?
No,
Or
it's not.
I don't
No,
know.
no,
Somebody asked who it.
no. Teddy's the one who asked Vincent who is in the closet, because Vincent. Oh well, shit! I can't say that. This hasn't happened yet. But Vincent, see, guys, this is how confusing the show is. The movie is,
Yeah, it's confusing
because
to talk about.
because
No, no.
Vincent calls Teddy, so that's the only reason he shows up.
Vincent?
Yeah. Well, that's a scene that you haven't. Well, you haven't talked about that scene yet because it hasn't happened yet.
Wait, but who's Vincent? Is that the hotel
No,
manager?
Vincent is the name of the main character, uh, Guy Pearce's character.
Leonard?
Oh my God! Look.
I'm trying to figure out who Vincent is. Who the fuck is Vincent? Oh my God.
Wow!
And you're like, we haven't got to that part yet. I'm like, oh my God, I don't remember Vincent.
Oh.
Oh my God. That's funny. That's funny. Oh my God, Leonard. Yeah.
Okay, onward. Let's just go. Fuck.
Okay, anyway. So anyway, Leonard says he doesn't know what to do with him. And so he marches him out. He's got a gun at his back, still doesn't know what to do with him. And then the next scene is he shows up at Natalie's asking who Dodd is. So this scene precedes the scene where he went to Natalie's house and asks who the fuck this guy is that he took the Polaroid. I feel like I'm No. I'm like mentally exhausted because every time I say a scene, I have to explain that it's the scene that goes before the scene that goes before this scene. And I'm just like, oh my God.
Actually,
Oh my God. Okay.
actually, you know what this movie's like? This movie's like I don't know if you guys ever played Jenga, but it's like stacking Jenga tiles and not wanting
Yeah.
the tower to fall.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the next scene is Guy Pearce is in the shower, and then there's he sees someone on the other side of the shower glass, and it's Dodd. So this is the scene where Dodd and him fight, and then obviously Guy Pearce knocks him out and puts him in the closet, which is how he got in the closet. The next scene is it sort of cuts to the next scene where they're running through a caravan park. Dodd and Guy Pearce's character, they're running through a caravan park, and then they drive away, and then it cuts to the next scene where he's at the hotel. Guy Pearce goes to the hotel and he goes into a room and he hides in a room, and it's the start of the previous. See, I'm like, anyway, let's just continue because like I'm just like mentally exhausted talking about this movie already. I don't even think we're halfway through. So the next scene is he's driving a car. He's driving a car. Okay, sorry. He's driving and then a car flags him down. He stops and then Dodd gets out of the car, and that's when they race through the caravan park. Anything you want to say about any of those scenes?
Yeah, I will say something short because I really really want to put you out of your misery. But in several scenes in this movie, Vincent's car has a busted window, and you really don't find out why that window is busted until you see the scene of Leonard being chased by Dodd through the mobile homes. That's all I want to say.
Oh, I didn't even notice the busted
Yeah,
window. Oh my! I mean, I was paying attention, but like to a point,
yeah.
because there was so much to sort
Mhm.
of take in. Anyway, the next scene is, um, where is the next scene? Oh, he's driving at night to some place, and then he's building a fire and he's burning items of his wife. So his wife's book and like some other stuff. So the next scene, it cuts to the next scene. He wakes up in the hotel room, he goes to the bathroom, and he opens the door of the bathroom, and there's like a girl. I think she's like snorting cocaine off her hand or something, and that's it. And then like you assume that it's a prostitute, but you don't know because
You
this
know,
movie is so choppy. So like that's that.
at
Mm.
this point in the film, I was sitting there going, "Wait a minute, these." I mean, look, this movie is nonsensical, as Dean has said multiple times. But at this point in the movie, I was like, "Wait a minute, what if Vincent is doing something else? And what if the no? But hold up, hold up, hold up. What if what he's doing, he's already done?"
You mean
Oh my
Leonard?
god, I did it again.
Who's Vincent? Do you know someone named Vincent? Did you watch a movie and then one of the characters was named Vincent?
Leonard. His name is fucking Leonard.
Leonard.
Guys, you
His
see,
name's
I
Leonard.
have the disease that Guy Pierce has in this movie because I can't remember.
You must have. You must have. But it must go away after this podcast is ended because I cannot have a friendship with you if you have his disease. I would just go mental. I'd go absolutely
No,
apeshit.
I need to keep my marble straight because all the shit that I do, I need to keep my marble straight. But I, but
Yes,
I,
please.
after that scene, I really thought that maybe Leonard has gone
Yeah.
through this scenario before. So that made me question,
Hmm.
perhaps the hooker or the junkie showing up in his hotel room was a part of Leonard's plan to go through this scenario again and again and again. Because another thing that I thought Christopher Nolan did very very well is that you don't really know how much time has passed since Leonard's wife got killed. So it may be 5 months or 20 years. You have no idea because,
Yeah, that's brought up multiple times in the movie. Teddy brings it up. He's like, you don't know how much time
right,
has passed. That's what he says. Like it could be a year, it could be 10 years.
right,
You don't know.
because Leonard is a very unreliable narrator. I mean, he's incredibly unreliable. So at that point of the movie, I started to suspect, and I started to, see the tea leaves on the ground, and I said, if Christopher Nolan and his brother are going this way, that's really cool.
Yeah. So the next scene is him checking into his hotel, and he's on the phone calling for an escort. And when the escort shows up, it's the girl from the bathroom from the previous scene. And then he tells her, "Wait for me to fall asleep, and then go into the bathroom and slam the door as loud as you can to wake me up. And I also want you to put these items around the room." So they're his wife's items. And she's kind of going, okay. And as an audience member, you're kind of going, okay. And it, I don't know, that scene. And I when I was reading up about the movie, there was a lot of people that didn't understand what the point of that scene was, because it never comes back and it doesn't really have anything to do with the storyline. So what do you think about that scene from from your perspective?
No, that scene really, you know, began my theory as to what is happening here, and as to what Leonard is really doing, and as to how many times he has looked for his wife's killer. So at this point, I'm thinking Leonard is a giant hamster, and the and and the case, and his quest for vengeance is the big giant hamster ball that he just keeps going, that he just keeps walking through over and over and over and over again. And the thing that is heartbreaking about it is that because of his condition, he can't remember that he's in one big giant loop.
Yeah, you do kind of feel sorry for him a lot through
So
this
so
movie.
I fo- so I found that scene very, very effective, because that triggered that idea in my head.
So the next scene is he gets in his car, Teddy's in his car, and he freaks out because he doesn't remember him. And like, if I was Teddy, oh my God, can you imagine seeing someone like a lot and never remembering who they were? Like, from the other person's perspective, if I was Teddy, I'd be like, oh, I'm like, me, like, you would just be mental. So Teddy's telling him that he can't trust Natalie. He's like, you can't trust her. Her boyfriend is a drug dealer, blah, blah, blah. And so at this point, Leonard, Guy Pearce, doesn't really know who to trust, because he knows that he can't trust Teddy because he's got that on the Polaroid. And now Teddy's saying he can't trust Natalie, and he's like, I don't. I would be, yeah, it's confusing. I would be so fucking confused if I was him. So anyway, the next scene is he's at Natalie's house. Natalie comes in, all like beaten up, which is when he met her at the diner. It's the same bruising, cut on the lip. It's the same thing. So you go, okay, this is the same instance. It's the same like beat up. And Guy Pearce is like, I'll find him and I'll bruise him up. And she tells him, I told him what your car looks like because I had to give him something. It's at that point where you kind of go, what? Like, yeah, I don't know. And then you start questioning Natalie's character, because that doesn't make sense. Oh, I had to give him something, so I told him what your car looks like. No, you kind of go, there's something, you kind of begin to get suspicious of Natalie, because again, this movie's not cut linear in a linear fashion, so you don't know who's good, who's bad. You have no idea. So anything to say about those
No,
scenes?
that's the genius of it. You're right. This film is not cut in a linear fashion. So when characters do things and when they react a certain way, you start to question their motives as an audience member. And as we're going to find out in just a few moments here, Natalie is far from being above board.
Yes, and the next scene, straight after this scene, is when you realize, oh, this is what's going on. This is what's happening. So we're at her house again, and Natalie says to Guy Pearce, I need you to get rid of Dodd for me, because she's saying Dodd did this to me. He's my boyfriend, he beat me up, blah, blah, blah. and Guy Pearce is like he's so innocent. Like the casting of Guy Pearce was so good because he's just so innocent looking. And then she starts getting frustrated with him and she starts berating him. She starts saying, "Oh, you're a nobody. Your wife was a whore and she slept around." And you're like, "What?" Like it just comes out of nowhere. And she just like every single thing that she could think of to hurt him, she does. And you're like, what is your angle here? What are you trying to? And then you're like, okay, wait a minute. Because at this point, right, she doesn't have bruises on her face. She's completely clean. So this is before Dodd beat her up. And so she's berating him, or your wife is a whore, you're a shit husband, blah, 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 blah. And he's standing there and he's just like, no, he's like backing off. He's looking at her like, oh, okay, this is a bit strange. And then I can't remember, she says something that just like gets him. And then he starts hitting her and beating her up. And when she looks at him, it's exactly the same bruises as from the restaurant, as from all the previous scenes. And you're like, oh, it wasn't Dodd. It was actually him that beat her up. That's how she got the bruises. So she leaves the house. She rushes out. She runs out of the house. And he's like, fuck. I have to remember that I did this. So he's frantically in her house trying to find a pen. He finds a piece of paper and she knows. So she knows she's gotten rid of all the pens and she's sitting in her car. And her car's in the driveway and she's sitting in her car and she's just staring at him frantically trying to find a pen. And you're like, what the fuck is she doing? And then she waits like 10 or 15 minutes and then she goes back into the house. And when she goes in, all beaten up, he turns around and he goes, oh, what happened to you? So his memory's completely wiped. So she knows how long it takes for his memory wipe to kick in. But how does she know that will be revealed in previous scenes. And then she says, oh my God, Dodd beat me up. And you're like, oh, what a floozy. Like, yeah, I loved that scene. I thought that scene really brought a lot of the story together.
Really begin to understand how people can take advantage of Leonard if they understand how his disease works. This movie is like a giant puzzle box, but a giant puzzle box being opened backwards. And with every door that you open, the puzzle box becomes more and more fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. That scene was just like, I love that scene. So anyway, the next scene is right back at Natalie's house again, and he's telling her what happened to his wife. So obviously this scene was like before.
Can I just interject?
Yeah.
His wife is played by Georgia Fox, and for those of you who like who like procedural shows, Georgia Fox is a legend for being one of the original actors who starred in the original CSI in the early 2000s. And
oh, that's where she's from. I was like, where have I seen her from? Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and I had the biggest crush on her in high school because I watched CSI all throughout middle school and high school along with Buffy. I just had to throw that little bit in there.
Yeah, that's exactly who she is. I was like, who the fuck is she? I know I've seen her before. Anyway, they're at Natalie's house and he's telling her what happened to his wife. So now we go into like the scenario of him because he says that's the last thing he actually remembers perfectly. After that is when he fucking can't remember shit. So we go up into the scenario. He's in bed. He hears a noise. He wakes up. He doesn't see his wife next to him. He grabs his gun. He hears noises in the bathroom. He kicks the bathroom door open and he sees a man hovering, like standing over his wife, like suffocating her with like the shower curtain, and he shoots him and he goes to sort of take the shower curtain off his wife, and then another man comes in and pushes him into the bathroom mirror and cracks the mirror, and he cracks his head in the mirror and he falls on the floor. And that's how he got his brain damage. That's why he can't remember anything. And fun fact, this is not in my trivia, but fun fact, Um, the scene where he cracks his head and he's on the floor and there's like all this blood pouring out of his head. Christopher Nolan didn't want that, and Guy Pearce said, "No, I think that would be really cool." And he put the and Christopher Nolan goes, "Oh, okay, I'll put it in." And when he put it in and saw it aesthetically looking, he really, really liked it, and he left it in.
And in all seriousness, that scene is very, very effective because that scene is basically where Vincent's whole disease comes from.
Vincent? Is it
Oh my
Vincent?
fucking Leonard. Okay. Leonard. Okay. Take God knows whatever. That scene is really great because that scene shows you where Leonard's disease came from. And Leonard, I can't remember who he says this to in the film, but at one point, one character asks him, "What's the last memory that you remember before your disease kicked in or your disability kicked in?" And he says, "It's the vision of my wife dead on the floor in our bathroom with the shower curtain over her head." And I'm like, holy fuck, that is some fucked up
fucked.
shit. But onward.
It is. So the next scene is he's at a bar and Natalie is the bartender. And so you're like, okay. And they don't, well, okay, you think they don't know each other yet because she's acting like she doesn't know him and obviously he doesn't know her. So that's that. That scene is that's it. The next scene is he's in his car. I think he's in his car. And then he finds a coaster in his pocket for Ferdy's bar. And on the back it says, "Come by Natalie." And he goes, oh, okay, so then he goes to the bar. So this is when he's in the bar with Natalie. This is the scene. Yep. We're going fucking backwards. All right. So he goes and sits at the bar and Natalie says her boyfriend told her about him. And then he says, I think he says or she says, "Did Teddy send you?"
She says
I think he says, "Did Teddy?" She says it, right. Sorry, I didn't write that down. "Did Teddy send you?" That's right. And then he sits down and then he goes to a booth, I think, and sits down. And then she brings him. Oh no. Look, I didn't write this down because I was literally dry heaving. When
spit.
She gets people to spit in like
disgusting.
a drink, and I was like literally I was like dry,
disgusting.
like I can't even, I didn't, yeah, so I don't want to dwell on that at all because I'm going to be fucking dry heaving. So anyway, he's talking to her, he spits in it too because she's like, no, it's like a game thingy, I don't know, she fucking says something. Anyway, he goes and sits in like a booth and she comes over, she's like, hi, and he doesn't remember her. So this is when she learns how much time she's got between his memory wipes. That's when she learns it. And so she gives him the drink that everybody spit in and he drinks it, and I'm going to dry heave. I don't want to talk about that. So let's just go to the next scene because that's fucking gross. So the next scene is he's getting tattooed at the tattoo parlor, one of his remembering tattoo things. Teddy comes in and he keeps telling him to leave town. It's not safe here. You got to leave town. It's not safe here. And we don't know why. He says cops are looking for him, but we really don't know why. He says cops are looking for him. He says, and then I think I think Leonard says there's a cop that's messing with him. And this is when he puts his hand in his pocket and finds the coaster for the bar, which was the previous scene. So then he pulls up to the bar, and when he pulls up to the bar, he sees Natalie out the front. Like I think she's like putting rubbish in the bin or something, and she asks if he's Jimmy, and he's like, I think he says no or something, I forgot. And then he enters the bar, and that's when he sits at the bar. But she already met him. She already knows him. So, but he obviously doesn't remember. So that's two instances where she understands the time difference between his memory wipes, and that's why she's able to kind of manipulate him later. Anything on those scenes before I continue?
What did you? I mean, obviously, Natalie is a person who is not above board, But do you think Natalie as a character functioned properly within the story? Like I understand that she was put there to sort of give the audience a sense of how Leonard's disease affects him and how and how it works. But I really didn't find her whole excuse for abusing Leonard all that interesting.
Nothing in this movie makes sense at all. So when I was watching this movie, I threw my screenwriter hat out the fucking window and I just
You
watched
know,
the
I
movie.
you know
Yeah, nothing makes
I
sense.
just want to point out here that as we're going through this, I'm getting exhausted hearing you talk.
I'm exhausted talking about it because I'm not just talking about it. I have to remember like scenes that preceded the scene that I'm talking about and explain those as well as this, and I'm mentally fucking
Yeah,
exhausted.
yeah.
So
Let's just be clear for any of our fellow writers who can be watching this. This movie is structurally immaculate, but if you're not in a certain kind of mood, do not watch this movie because this movie will make your brain hurt.
especially talking about it. That will make your brain hurt even more. So anyway, the next scene is he's leaving the hotel and then he turns around and takes a Polaroid of Teddy. So that's the Polaroid he has at the beginning of the film of Teddy, and Teddy then says he's an undercover cop and he's the one that's been on the phone with him, which makes no sense because I didn't write down the fucking black and white scenes. I don't want to go into the black and white unless you want to explain what the black and white scenes are
No, well, I no, well,
quickly.
I had a theory that the black and white scenes are everything that happened before the movie began. So
Yeah.
the black and white scenes show us how Leonard got to the town in the first place, and how his this mystery of him finding his killer's wife started. And I think those black and white scenes make a lot more sense once we figure out what is really happening here. But for that to happen, we got to keep pushing forward because the end
Yep.
really jiggers everything into place.
Yeah, yeah. So the next scene is this is when they go to the Guy Pearce character goes to the abandoned building from the beginning of the movie that Natalie told him about, and he what did I write down here? Oh, for fuck's sake. Oh, he hears a voice say, he goes into the abandoned building and he hears a voice say, Teddy. And so Guy turns around and he sees the man in the photo with Natalie. So Natalie's husband, right? This is what me and Marcelo are trying to say. You have to pay attention because if you blinked or looked away from that scene, you would have no fucking clue who this guy was. But he was in the photo. So you're like, oh, but that's the reason. That's the reason Natalie's fucking with him, right? Because he killed his husband, her
Yep.
husband, right? That's the whole thing.
Bingo.
Right. Exactly. So at that point you don't know, but at this point you're like, "Oh, okay." So this is Natalie's husband, and then he keeps saying, "Are you Jimmy?" And he's like, So anyway, they have I don't know if they have a fight or
They have
anything.
a
I can't remember.
they
So
they have a row in
they have a
they
row.
have
Yeah,
a
yeah.
row in the building, and then they go out for chips. No, I'm kidding.
Yes. They have a row, and Guy Pearce strangles that guy, kills him, and he changes into his clothes. So when he goes to the abandoned building, he's kind of dressed like maybe like a lumberjack. And when he kills this guy, he puts on his suit, which is the suit that he's wearing for the
It's a
whole movie. And you think that that's his clothes, and it's not. It's this guy that he's just killed
it's
clothes.
no, but this end scene is the beginning of the movie.
Yes, exactly. This is the beginning of the movie. So he changes into his clothes, which is the suit he's been wearing for the whole thing. Let me just change my notes over, and then Teddy shows up, and so now Guy Pearce does this thing where he pretends not to know who Teddy is, right? So this is the first time he's actually pretended, oh, I don't know who you are. And so Teddy goes, oh, fuck, so now I've got to try to do fucking this shit again. So he lures him in to the building and then he hits him over the head. He grabs his ID and he's a cop, which he said before, but that was in a scene that was after. This is before. This is before that. Yeah. Okay. This is
We're
nearly
almost
over,
done.
folks.
But I was like, Dean, we're almost done. Hold on.
I'm gonna make it to the finish line. So, grab his ID. He's a cop, and he tells him, "This is what I liked. This is kind of like I don't know if it's a twist. I guess it is." So he tells him, "Did you know that your wife actually survived the attack?" And he was like, "What?" And he goes, "She couldn't cope with your brain injury, so she left you." And he was like, and he just like, because he doesn't remember anything, so why would he remember that? And so he thinks he's fucking with him. And he says, so Teddy's saying he helped him. He actually helped Guy Pearce's character find the other guy that was trying to rape and kill his wife, the guy that got away. He actually helped him find the other guy a year ago, and he killed him. And Guy Pearce is like, no, that never happened. He goes, yes, it did, but you forgot. And then Teddy continues to tell him. So Teddy's basically using him to clear people that he doesn't like by pointing him in the direction of, hey, this is the guy who might have killed your wife. Basically, he's taking advantage of him, saying, oh, this is like a random drug dealer. I don't like him. So let's just pretend that this is the guy that you're looking for, and so you can kill him. So it's pretty ingenious. But what else? The other thing that Teddy says, which I found was interesting, is in the black and white story that I didn't write down, it's a backstory on Leonard. He's saying he's an insurance broker, and there's this story of this guy and this girl, and this guy has his brain injury, and this woman has diabetes and has to have this insulin shot every day. And Teddy is saying, no, that's your story. That's you're pretending that's someone else. That's your story. Your wife had diabetes. Like, that's your story. And he was like, no, my wife never had diabetes, and blah, 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 blah. So basically the whole like black and white sequence to me was him and his wife, but he's putting it as if it's not. Like, is that right or is that not right?
You're actually blowing the back of my head off. Because I, as an audience member, I read that straight. So when you start going, wait a minute, did Leonard make the whole thing up? Because if Leonard made the whole thing up, that changes the whole dynamic of the film. But going on, going on that assumption, I really find it heartbreaking and kind of disturbing how Teddy uses Vincent as his sword of justice, and he actually
Hitman,
and he actually gives Vincent this sense of purpose, because if Vincent didn't have this, Vincent would basically be like a chicken walking around the world without any purpose. And the thing that Leonard said, the thing that Leonard says, when Teddy, first, tells him this story, he goes, "You took advantage of me, and you did this, and you did that." But then Teddy, I believe, shows Leonard a Polaroid of Vincent, presuming
of Vincent. Is it of Vincent? He shows Leonard a Polaroid of Vincent.
Oh.
Or he shows Leonard a Polaroid of Leonard.
Oh. He shows Leonard a Polaroid of Leonard, presumably when Leonard originally killed the men that were trying to rape his wife. Okay? And
yep.
In that Polaroid, Leonard has such a look of euphoria and happiness on his face. So that's when Teddy gets the idea to use Leonard to clear his ledger.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, see? This movie's mindfuck. Yes. But that whole thing was like a mind twist, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So everything kind of comes together at the end. But he this is where he writes. He's in the car. Leonard's in the car, so he steals the car. Like the car he's been driving around in the whole movie was the guy that he just killed. Car. He took his clothes and he took his car. So the thing that I like was he's got the what is it? I think he's got the Polaroid of Teddy. Yeah, and he writes on the back of it, "Don't believe his lies."
It's Teddy's Polaroid. Yeah.
Yeah, don't believe his lies. But he knows. He knows that this is bullshit, but it's like he wants to stay in the fantasy because what else has he got? So he's actually, from my point of view, he's actually done that on purpose to keep, because he goes, well, what else? Basically, what I got, like, what else is he gonna do? Does that make sense? And then he writes down Teddy's license plate number as like evidence. So as to like who he's searching for. So he knows it's not him, but again, this is the start of the movie. He's lying to himself because he has to have something to do
film,
in a way.
With the during the final sequence of this film, I thought that the film really brought up an interesting question of living in reality or living in a fantasy world, and how one perceives themselves in each scenario.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought it was funny that it's like, oh, he actually has chosen to live in the fantasy world, which I thought was really, really cool. And then, so he's in the car, blah, 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 blah. And the last scene of the movie is he stops at the tattoo parlor and he looks at the license plate number he wrote down. And this is the start of when he starts getting his tattoos and of the story. So the story ends where the story actually begins. That's the end of the movie.
Trivia?
Oh, trivia. Yes, trivia. The movie took 25 days to shoot.
Ah, that's economical.
That's all right. That's not bad. Carrie-Anne Moss shot all her scenes in 8 days.
Wow. Okay.
It's not bad for a week of work. Guy Pearce, before he shot this movie, was actually 230 pounds, and he lost which is 230 pounds, but for UK and Australia it was 104 kilos before filming, and he lost all the weight and put on the muscle for this role.
Oh my God.
Which I thought is awesome. Other actors considered for Leonard was Brad Pitt, Charlie Sheen, and Thomas Jane. Thomas Jane would have been good.
Thomas Jane would have been an interesting choice.
Yeah, he would have been good. And the last one is other actors considered for the role of Natalie were Ashley Judd, Famke Janssen, and Angelina Jolie.
Famke Janssen.
Famke Janssen would have been awesome. I love her.
Jean Grey, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Jean Grey. God, but she's gorgeous.
Awesome.
Yes, so that's the end of the trivia.
Awesome. All right, guys, I won't actually put you through, pain any longer. The only thing I will say, if you guys made it through this podcast episode of ours, thank you very, very much. As I often say, if one day someone is kind enough to make you a mixtape, that must mean that they truly, truly love you.
The Mixtape Podcast is a Balloonhead Productions presentation.